Hello, and welcome to the Quantum Fit Podcast. I'm Taylor, and I am your host. This podcast is all about applying the different principles of quantum physics and quantum biology to your health and fitness. This gives us a holistic view of how different environmental factors, such as sunlight or cold, play a major role in your overall health. So I won't just be talking about diet or exercise and developing good habits. If you want to really make lasting changes in how you feel, think, and act, then I'd recommend you try to listen closely and have an open mind to what I have to say. Every day I'll be hitting you with a quick 7 to 15 minute long podcast. I keep it short like this because it makes it both informative and to the point so that you don't feel quite so overwhelmed with information. Also, currently I do not do any kind of advertisements. So instead, I ask that you share this podcast with a friend or family member if you enjoyed the message and gained something from it. I want to be able to spread quality and easy to understand content that everyone can take and use in their own daily lives. I would highly appreciate it. On to the episode, spiraling all the way down. I've talked about structured water quite a bit in previous science-heavy episodes, so I thought it'd be time to dive into the basic structure and nature of it. You will want to take notes and re-listen a couple times. I'm going to be moving quickly and covering all of the major points that you should know. Before or while listening to this podcast, you should look up my Instagram at RealQuantumFit. I shared a post with 3 pictures. The first one, which is the first one that we're going to be going into, shows what structured water looks like when it's against a surface. Another one shows a side view of stacked layers of structured water. And then finally there's one where you're able to see how the different layers actually stack or slide on top of each other. Also, I'm going to use all 3 terms interchangeably. So easy or exclusion zone or structured water. All 3 terms, they mean the exact same thing, just so you know. All right, so moving on. Structured water is found everywhere. It is most commonly found next to negatively charged surfaces, which you could also call hydrophilic surfaces or water-loving surfaces. And again, I'm sticking to this right now, but keep in mind that water contains structured water pretty much at all times. That's how raindrops get their shape and why water balls up into droplets on hydrophobic surfaces. Now again, on this first picture, we can see that there's single atom layered stacks of structured water on the side of a hydrophilic surface. This structuring first happens because the surface has certain charges spaced out in a way that lines up with structured water's own charges. In other words, water uses the surface as a template to create its own structure. It should also be noted that these layers, although it doesn't show it in the picture obviously, these layers can actually extend from the surface some millions of times away from the surface, assuming the surface is extremely hydrophilic. That's really, really far compared to the old belief that water could only stack maybe a dozen times. We can also see that the shape of the layers is hexagonal. Getting these hexagon shapes requires the normal H2O water molecules to change into H3O2 molecules, which inherently makes the molecule have a -1 charge instead of a neutral charge. Right, because H2O, the H, the hydrogen, each one has a positive charge, whereas the oxygen has a negative charge. So H2 is a +2, whereas the O is a -2, so H2O, it equals out. But H3O2, you get H3, that's +3, and the O2 makes -4. So overall, H3O2 is a -1 molecule. This is important because in the structure, if all of those molecules are H3O2, that means that overall, all of these layers will create a negative charge, which it does. This is shown by Dr. Gerald Pollack in all of his studies on structured water. This also means that there's strong positive charges within the water as well. I mean, there has to be. It has to balance out. You can't, just have negative and then not have a positive. It has to equalize somehow. And that positive charge typically tends to form right at the end of the exclusion zone. It's also good to know that the hexagon shape is nature's best light collector. It easily allows light photons and electrons to zip through the structure. This means that easy water should be highly conductive and receptive to light. And it is, again, shown by Gerald Pollack in all of his studies. Now, if you look at the other two pictures I shared, you can see an image where the layers are stacking up high from left to right. And it's really hard to tell in this picture, but the stacks are also shifting from forward to backward, which gives us a spiral shape. In order for the layers of structured water to keep from repelling each other too strongly, they can't stack directly on top of each other. The hexagons can't all line up as a pillar. Again, this is because the structure has, each layer has a strong negative charge, so it's not possible for them to line up directly with each other. So the other picture shows how the layers stack by actually gliding across each other so that, and that's what allows the easy structure to actually remain stable and it doesn't just push itself apart. It's also good to know that proteins in the body all have spiral shapes. So the theory put out by Gerald Pollack is that easy water with large amounts of spiraling will allow it to actually better interact with proteins and help facilitate the actions of proteins. Because if the protein has a spiral shape and the water has a spiral shape, it's better able to actually accept the charges of the protein versus, if it was just flat, basically, with no spiraling. It's an interesting theory. As far as I know, there's not a whole lot of research that has been done on it yet, if that spiraling does in fact affect, proteins and how they work. Anyway, I know this is complicated stuff, so take your time soaking it in. Rewind if you have to. These are the very basics to easy water, and once you have them down, everything further on will make much more sense. I'll definitely be doing a deeper dive in a future episode. Finally, as an on-topic but side note, I wanted to touch on an interesting theory I have. This is especially for those of you that do functional patterns. Since we focus on training the body to naturally utilize spirals and parabolas in our movement, I've thought about how this might really affect tissues. Since all forces we introduce to the body will create very specific pressure within the tissues and cells, might using spirals while training force structured water within the tissues and cells to also spiral, again, because of that pressure. In other words, could part of FP's benefits lie not just in correcting dysfunctions by hydrating, dry tissues, but by actually creating more highly structured, aka spiraled water in all of those tissues? I mean, obviously connecting slings is also a big part of it, but as far as hydration goes, again, what if it's a big part of it is we're actually causing that water to become more structured, more spiraled? Again, this is all resting on, the theory of if more spiraling water in tissues equals better utilization and function of proteins. then I don't see why this couldn't be a possibility. Anyway, I thought it was an interesting theory to share with you. So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. For questions and comments, find me on Instagram at RealQuantumFit, my personal Facebook page, Taylor Kelson, or send me a voice message across the Anchor app if you're listening to me on that. See ya!